My family banned me from the beach house reunion, but they didn't know I owned it. I wasn't included. Not this year, not last year, not for the past 10. And it wasn't a glitch. It never is. The email arrived on a Tuesday. The subject line chirped like it had a smile on its face. Whitmore Family Beach Weekend 2025, RSVP by Friday. I already knew I wasn't meant to see it. Maybe someone forgot to remove my name from an old list. Maybe Outlook betrayed them. Either way, the message landed, and I clicked. Photos were embedded like confetti. Caroline and her husband smiling with cocktails, the twins half buried in sand. Uncle Steve playing guitar like it was a beachside concert, Mum in a sun hat holding a tray of deviled eggs. The comments were worse than the photos. So excited, can't wait to see everyone bringing my famous crab dip. Everyone was tagged, everyone but me. Not even a typo version. No Eleanor, no L, nothing. As I scrolled through the guest list, something sharp settled in my chest. These weren't just names. They were people I once knew by scent and laughter. Adam, who used to sneak cookies to me under the table. Becca, who I shared a bunk bed with the summer I turned 12. Even the neighbour's dog had made the family photo. The last time I was invited, I had just moved to LA, still unpacking, still hopeful. I flew across the country, gifts in tow, only to find no bed made up for me, no place card at dinner. Caroline said, "Oh, we didn't think you were really coming." That was the first quiet goodbye. Just absence. The kind of absence that hums low and steady, like a fridge in the background, until you realise it's gone silent. I sat there in my Santa Monica office. The floor-to-ceiling windows glittered with Pacific sun, and my diplomas smiled down from minimalist white frames. I had an espresso machine that cost more than my first car, my inbox was clean, and my career was stable. But in that moment, the entire room felt hollow. My office had all the markings of a woman who'd made it minimalist art, ergonomic furniture, a glass paperweight shaped like an orb of Saturn. But none of it warmed me. I remembered a Christmas Eve 5 years ago. I had called the beach house to say hi to feel less alone. Caroline answered distracted. I could hear waves, music, laughter, life. "Hey, Elle," she said, "can I call you back?" We're about to do the gift exchange. She never did. I watched a live stream later on Caroline's social media. Everyone wore matching pajamas. I counted 15 people, 15 smiles. My phone stayed quiet. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened a photo album from childhood. Every picture where I was front and centre had been taken by Dad. He never let me disappear. All steel and glass, no warmth. I looked at the screen again, and I did something that surprised even me. I searched for the beach house. Just a reflex, I told myself. A click, nothing more. The Whitmore Beach House. Weathered white paint, sky blue shutters, rope swing out front that always creaked louder in the evenings. It was the last place I saw my father laugh before the stroke thinned his voice to whispers. We used to sit on the back porch at night, just him and me, listening to the sea murmur secrets. Once, after a fight with Mum about the school, I had run upstairs and cried into the attic pillows. Dad found me hours later, a flashlight in one hand and a peanut butter sandwich in the other. "You can't always be their version of you," he'd whispered, brushing hair from my forehead. "But you'll always be mine." That porch was where I learned how to be quiet and still, and where I realised silence was not the same as peace. There it was on a real estate listing. For sale. Not for rent. Not under renovation. No proud post from Caroline. No nostalgic message from Mum. Just a digital flyer buried inside a niche real estate portal. Price reduced. Motivated seller. Deed in process. The agent's name lit up a memory. She was the same one who handled my grandmother's property after she passed. And just like that, my heart clicked into something cold and focused. They were letting it go. quietly, like they'd already let go of me. But I didn't feel rage. Not yet. Instead, I turned to my bookshelf. It was there, the turquoise shell, the one Dad gave me when I was 9. He'd plucked it from the tide and pressed it into my palm like a secret. "You think in tides, Ellie," he said. "Not waves. Tides come back stronger." That was the moment the idea started, like a slow tide pulling inward. They had erased me from their invites, but I still remembered how to write one. I wasn't angry, not in the fiery, throw something kind of way. It was deeper than that. A settling, a recognition. They had spent a decade writing me out of their story, believing I wouldn't notice. But I had. Every line, every photo I wasn't in, every call I stopped making. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. A quiet reclamation of self. If they couldn't see me, then maybe it was time I stepped into view on my own terms. And this time, I'd be the host. The Whitmore family wasn't perfect, but it had a rhythm, a structure. Every summer, we converged like clockwork at the beach house on Tybee Island, the kind of place with creaky floorboards and sea salt clinging to every corner. The walls held generations of secrets, laughs echoed from card games, whispered crushes under porch lights, and the scent of Grandma Whitmore's peach cobbler that never quite faded. Caroline, my older sister, was the maestro of these reunions. She wore celebration-like perfume, bright, thick, unmistakable. Always the first to start a family group chat, the one who named the beach trips with custom hashtags. She baked cupcakes with sea-themed toppers and handed out itinerary pamphlets like she ran a resort. She was undeniably the sunbeam in the family. And I was the moon, visible only when it got dark enough. Growing up, Caroline led the games, made speeches at family dinners and choreographed dance routines with their cousins. I helped clean up, passed the ketchup, took the group photos but never in them. The contrast wasn't malicious. It just was. Still, I have memories of trying to belong, wedging myself between the rhythms they made and hoping they'd make space for mine. One summer when I was 8, I spent 2 days building a shell museum under the stairs of the porch. Little labels I wrote in marker, naming each piece: mermaid's tooth, sea dragon's scale. I waited for someone to notice. Caroline walked by, laughed and said, "That's cute. Mum, look, Ellie made a shell graveyard." Mum barely glanced and murmured something about cleaning it up before guests arrived. No one asked what the labels meant. No one asked if I wanted to show them. I remember tracing waves in the sand with my finger while Caroline and the cousins played volleyball. Dad came and sat next to me, handed me a cold slice of watermelon I hadn't eaten, and asked what I was drawing. "Stories," I said. He nodded like I'd said something important. The house always felt big when it was full of other people's voices. But late at night, when everyone was asleep, I'd sneak into the sunroom with a flashlight and read Nancy Drew under a blanket. Sometimes I'd hear the ocean and imagine it saying my name, like, even the tide knew I was trying. I didn't need to be centre stage. I just wanted a seat in the row. Dad saw me. He always did. He noticed when I was quiet too long. He remembered that I liked mystery novels and disliked watermelon. When I was 12 and sobbed because I didn't get the lead in the church play, he took me for pancakes and said, "Some stars shine where no one claps. Shine anyway." But after his stroke, that bridge cracked. He could still smile, still listen, but his words came slow and jagged. I flew in from California that fall, dropping everything to sit by his bedside, reading Steinbeck aloud because he once said it reminded him of youth. Caroline didn't come until day 4, said she couldn't get time off. Mum barely entered the hospital room. When she did, it was with pursed lips and a perfumed scarf she held over her nose. One evening, I asked about the will, the house, the trust. I didn't want money, I wanted clarity. Security for him. Mum smiled like a blade. Caroline and I have it handled, sweetheart. Don't trouble your pretty head. That was the first time I felt it. Not just the exclusion, but the certainty that they had already decided I didn't count. When Dad was discharged, I offered to stay and help. Mum declined. We've got people for that. The next summer, when I tried to visit the beach house, the key wasn't under the mat. Caroline texted later, "Break-in last month. We had to change the locks." There was no mention of a break-in in the local news. I stopped flying in for the holidays. The silence wasn't dramatic, it was defensive. I still sent gifts, cards, even a donation to Caroline's school fundraiser. But no one called. No one asked why I hadn't shown up. And I stopped asking. Mum posted a picture one day of Dad and Caroline on the shore at sunset. I recognised it. I had taken it. She cropped me out. That was the year I stopped sending gifts. But I didn't stop watching. Exclusion doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. It drips instead of crashes. 1,000 tiny snubs, quiet as static until you realise the silence has shape. The signs had been there, always. A missed invite, a forgotten detail, a subtle shift from, "Oh, we thought you knew," to, "Oh, we didn't think you'd mind." One year, no one mentioned Mum's birthday dinner. I found out through a cousin's Instagram story, a glowing table at a downtown bistro wine glasses raised everyone in linen and pearls. The caption read, "Whitmore Girls' Night Just As Blessed." Another time, Caroline threw a lavish birthday party for her twins. The theme was pirates and mermaids. I sent custom storybooks with their names printed on the cover, handmade by a friend in publishing. No reply. Not even a text, thanks. I saw them in the background of a cousin's video unopened on a side table, half covered by wrapping paper. And still, I tried. I mailed Christmas cards. I sent a fruit basket to Mum's new address when she downsized. I donated to the school art fund in Caroline's name. Once Caroline called me from a craft store. "We're putting together centerpieces for the summer gathering. Do you prefer teal or coral napkins?" I paused. "I'm not sure I'll be able to make it." She chirped back. "That's okay. We'll save you a plate." No plate was saved. The table was set for 12. I saw it in the photos. Then came the edits. The digital omission stung more than any confrontation. A family photo album was uploaded to Facebook, captioned, "Everyone together again." But I wasn't in any of them. Not a single candid, not a blurry background moment. I recognised outfits, a scarf I'd given Mum, a bracelet Caroline borrowed from me in high school. I had been there. I'd taken some of the pictures, but you wouldn't know it. One night, scrolling through old folders on my laptop, I found a photo of Dad and Caroline standing on the shore at dusk. The sky is a watercolour of pink and gold. His arm around her head tipped back, laughing. I remembered that evening. I remembered the camera in my hand, the wind tugging at my sleeves, Dad turning just before I clicked the shutter. The version posted online cropped me out. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cruel, but it was precise, erased cleanly. It reminded me of that night, 3 years ago. Dad had just been moved to in-home care after his stroke. I flew back on short notice and offered to stay with him for the week. Caroline came by once late with cupcakes and loud apologies. We sat down for dinner that Sunday. Just the three of us, Caroline, Mom and me. I asked gently about long-term planning. About the house, about Dad's wishes. The air shifted. Caroline stiffened. "Are you really bringing this up now?" I said, "I just want to understand what he wants. We all should." Mum put down her fork, slow and deliberate. "You've been gone a long time, Eleanor. Maybe it's better if you let the ones who stayed handle it." It wasn't anger in her voice. It was finality, like a door clicking shut. I didn't argue. I cleared the plates, washed every dish, and said goodnight. That was the last time they let me near the table, literally and figuratively. I stared at the image for a long time. Then I whispered aloud to no one I didn't disappear. I was edited out. I wasn't missing. I wasn't absent. It was inconvenient, not loud enough to be a problem, not needed enough to be included. And so they made room for their comfort. By slowly removing mine, every omission became a chapter, every crop a comma, until my presence no longer fit the narrative they wanted. But I had watched it. I had listened. And soon they would remember how it feels when the footnote becomes the author. Because some of us weren't lost. We were just never called back. It started with a whisper, a tug, a shadow of a memory. I couldn't sleep one night, too many thoughts, looping like bad reruns. I opened my laptop fingers, moving before I had words for why. I typed the old address into the search bar, 36 Sandhill Drive, Tybee Island, Georgia. The house used to be unsearchable. It was ours, unlisted, private, safe, but now for sale. Not even a prominent listing. No red banners or broker's pride, just a quiet square of photos in a mid-tier agency's inventory, like someone trying to sneak out the back door of a memory. The shutters were still that seafoam blue Dad had insisted on, though they needed painting. The porch swing looked like it hadn't been oiled in years. But it was unmistakable. My family's beach house, listed, public, and silent. There had been no group chat, no call, no explanation, not even a mention in the quarterly family update email Caroline occasionally blasted out. I checked twice. The agent's name was familiar. Lauren Abernathy. She'd handled my grandmother's estate 15 years ago. She knew our family, knew the house, and apparently she knew how to keep secrets too. I sat motionless, staring at the words. Price reduced, motivated seller, deed under process. The seller wasn't listed as a person. It was an LLC, something generic Tybee Shores Holding Group or some other meaningless name. A trick, really. One I recognised from work. Shell ownership, used to separate emotion from transaction. Caroline must have set it up. That was her style, smile, sell, spin. But this wasn't just a house. It was the last place Dad laughed. It was the porch where he held my science fair poster and said I was brighter than the sun. I wasn't angry yet, but something inside me locked into place. I closed the laptop, reached for my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Savannah. Pause. Then Ellie. Is everything okay? I need you to help me look at a deed. Savannah had once lived across from us in Savannah. Yes, really. We grew up playing detective with walkie-talkies. She became one. A paralegal in property law. Sharp as glass, loyal as pine. I sent her the listing. Within 15 minutes, she called back. Ellie, I pulled the property report. Girl, you need to see this. She emailed the file. PDFs are stacked like cards, pages and pages of ownership trail, and right there, buried in the trust documents my father had set up, was a clause. Secondary beneficiary clause. My name, clear as day. If the property fell into legal delinquency, lapsed, taxes, expired insurance, improper transfer, the trust defaulted to me. Savannah highlighted the problem areas in bold. They never filed the new insurance. County records show no coverage renewal after your dad's last policy expired. Also, taxes are unpaid. 2 quarters. That alone triggers the clause. I blinked. So, I can take it if you want it. No court fight. Just paperwork. It's yours, Ellie. I stared at my reflection on the laptop screen. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed. They had let the house rot. I was going to resurrect it, not for revenge, but because I remembered what my father said that day on the porch when the ocean wind tangled my hair and he pressed a turquoise shell into my palm. You think in tides, Ellie, not waves. You come back stronger. It brought back that last summer before the stroke. Dad and I had taken the old canoe out beyond the breakers past, where Caroline liked to tan into the hush of salt and sky. He'd let me row slow and clumsy until we were adrift with nothing but horizon. "You don't have to move fast to get somewhere," he said, watching the clouds drift like lazy sails. We had eaten sandwiches, we packed ourselves turkey, for him tomato and hummus for me. He'd smiled watching me scrape off the crusts. Always editing, he teased. I remember the sunburn I got that day, the way my shoulders peeled, and he helped rub aloe in without a word of complaint. I remember how when we returned, no one noticed we'd been gone for hours. Caroline was staging a photo op on the porch. Mum was on a call. No one asked what we talked about, but I remembered every word. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "Someday they'll need someone who knows how to rebuild, not just decorate." That moment had no photos, no captions, no witnesses, but it was mine, and I carried it like an heirloom no one else could see. This was the tide turning. I didn't rush, I didn't scream, I didn't post cryptic quotes on social media or send angry emails. I opened Excel, the spreadsheet loaded like a battlefield. Columns of savings options, liquid assets, emergency funds, discretionary income. I had been frugal, efficient, unnoticed. I had built a life no one celebrated, but one that could afford a property lawyer and a notary within 24 hours. I made a list. I made 3 copies. Then I called Jameson. He was the best real estate attorney I knew. Not the flashiest, not the one Caroline would have picked. He wore sensible shoes and carried a briefcase with actual paper in it. When he answered, I spoke calmly. "Jameson, I'm executing a fallback clause in a trust. There's a family beach house in Tybee being sold improperly. I want to intercept the sale." There was silence on the line. Then, you always did know how to keep things interesting. By nightfall, I had printed every relevant document: trust language, county delinquency reports, screenshots of the expired insurance, a notarized affidavit from Savannah, a typed summary. I didn't send anything to Caroline. I didn't alert Mom. I kept it quiet, clean, legal. I uploaded a digital copy to a password-protected external drive and stored the physical file in a fireproof box under my bed. Then I called Lauren, the listing agent. She didn't recognize my voice until I said my full name: Eleanor Whitmore, daughter of Thomas. There was a long pause, then a sharp breath. "Oh, you." I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I'd like to purchase the property. I understand it's still under your agency. "Yes," she said slowly. "It's technically still active. We've had interest, but nothing binding yet. I'll be submitting an offer tonight. Full asking. Under the trust clause, the title defaults to me due to current violations. The documents are on their way." Another pause. Are you sure you want to do this?" I smiled, not cruelly, but fully. "I've never been more certain." She sent the final paperwork within an hour. I signed every page with a pen Dad had given me the year I left for college. I clicked submit with fingers that didn't shake. The deed was reassigned by Thursday. No group text was sent. No announcement was made. The beach house was mine. I waited 2 days. Then opened the guest booking portal Caroline had used every year. The Whitmore family beach weekend had already been entered into the system. Friday to Sunday. Same 3 rooms, same catered menu, same assumption. I cancelled the reservation. Then I rebooked it. Under a new name: guest, Miss Eleanor Whitmore, single occupancy, master suite. Under preferences, I added cotton linens, firm pillows, Perrier Jouet on ice. Under notes, please ensure full privacy. Owner request. The confirmation email arrived with a polite chime. I didn't toast. I didn't cry. I opened a fresh document on my laptop and began to write instructions for the front desk. If Caroline arrives, be kind. If Mum follows, remain professional. No need for drama. This wasn't revenge. This was proof. Proof that I had always been there, that I had always mattered, that just because they stopped looking didn't mean I stopped existing. And this time, when they arrived for the annual reunion, they'd find more than just locked doors. They'd find my name, spelled correctly, on the deed. I arrived early, not to welcome them, not to prepare, just to see it again before they touched it. The beach house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I had grown. Maybe because I'd finally stopped squinting at it through the lens of longing. The shutters still leaned like tired elbows. The porch swing is still tilted left. Someone had replaced the front lantern with a solar bulb that blinked at random. But the bones were there, the breath of it. The hush of salt and wind was like a voice I knew. Inside, the air was quiet, the kind of quiet you get only after grief has been scrubbed out. The sheets were turned down. The champagne chilled. My name, Miss Eleanor Whitmore, typed perfectly on the reservation slip. I left before anyone arrived, parked 2 streets over in a rental, waited. At 6:42 p.m, Caroline's white SUV pulled into the gravel drive like it owned the ocean. Her husband stepped out first, already fussing with the bags. The twins spilled from the back seat, bickering over who forgot the tablet charger. Then Caroline emerged. Oversized sunglasses, perfect posture, a sundress the colour of ripe lemons. Behind her was a second car, Uncle Steve's van. Then Mom in the back seat carefully stepped down in white linen slacks and a matching top. Pearls, lip balm, no makeup, the uniform of gracious judgment. They wheeled luggage up the walk, laughing. The front desk clerk, a young woman with a neat pixie cut and polite eyes, stepped from behind the counter. I watched from the edge of the lobby. She glanced at the clipboard, smiled. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't have any of your names listed on the reservation." Caroline stopped mid-stride. "I think there must be a mistake. This is the Whitmore family weekend. We book it every year." The clerk checked again. "It's reserved under Miss Eleanor Whitmore, single guest." There was a pause. The kind that reshapes the air. Mum stepped forward. "I'm sorry, who? Miss Eleanor Whitmore?" The clerk repeated. "She finalised the reservation last week." Caroline laughed, or tried to. It cracked midway. There must be some confusion. I stepped forward. I didn't need theatrics. I didn't need sound. Just the click of my heels on the tile. "There's no confusion," I said, calm, clear, not looking at Caroline, not yet. The deed was transferred under Clause 3C of the original trust. As of Thursday, I am the sole owner of the property. Her sunglasses slid slightly. "You bought the house." "No," I said, "I reclaimed it." Mum's lips parted. "Why would you do this?" I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. "Because I wasn't invited. But I don't need an invitation when I hold the keys." I turned to the clerk, handed her my ID. "Please ensure anyone not on my guest list is escorted out politely." Then I added gently, but kindly, "They're family." The clerk nodded. No one spoke, not Caroline, not Mom, not the cousins. Silence did the work. Let them explain it to each other. Let them say my name. Let them taste what it feels like to be on the outside of something you thought was yours. They left slowly. No tantrum, no slammed doors, just the sound of their shoes on tile and the rustle of disbelief. I didn't follow them. I didn't have to. They knew. And this time they couldn't edit me out. I thought the silence would last. I thought the hush that followed their retreat from the beach house would be the end of it. But people like Caroline don't lose quietly. The news van showed up 2 mornings later. Parked just beyond the hedges, the logo on the side read, "Southeast Spotlight." Their anchor, plastic smile, stiff collar voice made for scandal, stood out front as if breaking national news. I watched from the upstairs window unseen. By noon, the headlines had hit daughter exploits legal loophole to steal family's legacy. Subhead, Whitmore heiress accused of manipulating trust during father's illness. They didn't name Caroline, but I knew the source. She had always excelled at expressing sorrow, and Mom, well denial wrapped in pearls, was her lifelong talent. The article portrayed me as estranged, bitter, a daughter fixated on technicalities, a woman who arrived late to the bedside and early to the bank. The calls poured in, former colleagues, distant classmates, an old flame who asked, "Is this true? You kicked your own family out?" I didn't respond, not at first, because when you're used to being invisible, visibility feels like heat rash. But Savannah knew better. We hadn't always been close. Savannah was the kind of high school friend you drift from when ambition pulls you in opposite directions. But we reconnected the way women sometimes do, quietly, through small acts of loyalty rather than declarations. She sent screenshots without being asked. She tagged emails that she knew I wasn't copied on. No drama, just diligence. That's how Savannah loved methodically, fiercely, with the kind of loyalty that doesn't ask for attention. She had once told me over coffee after my father's funeral, "I don't like how they talk about you when you're not in the room." But I know better. I've always known better. I didn't cry then, but her words stayed with me. Not because they were loud, but because they were rare. When the headlines broke, I didn't need to ask for help. Savannah had already started the folder, already labelled it Record for Truth, already triple-checked the metadata on each file. She knew the rhythm of my silence, and where others interpreted it as guilt, she saw it for what it was, a boundary drawn after years of bruises. "Time to speak," she texted. "Only if it's true," I replied. "Then we speak through the record." We didn't issue a statement. We didn't beg for nuance. We assembled a file. First, the audio. Dad's voice crackled but firm. Recorded from a summer afternoon on the porch, 2 years before the stroke took his strength. "I want Eleanor to have the house," he said. "Caroline makes things loud. Eleanor makes them last." Then the texts, screenshots from Savannah's archive. A conversation between Mom and Caroline. "She won't come. She never does. And honestly, that's better. She doesn't belong here. Mum, you're right. It's just easier when she stays gone." Then Caroline. "She'd only make things complicated. Don't feel bad. She's used to being left out." And finally, the video. Dad, again this time wrapped in a blanket, the ocean murmuring behind him. I know she feels forgotten. But I remember. I remember who sat with me when I couldn't walk, who read to me when I forgot words. Give her this place. It's not just wood and paint, it's memory. I didn't send it to everyone, just one reporter, Melissa Tran. She had written a story 3 years ago about elder care abuse and inheritance injustice. Thoughtful, slow, ethical. I sent her a folder, no embellishment, no tagline, just a message. "Here is the full story. Let the truth speak." She called that night. I listened, I cried, she said, "I'll write it exactly as it is." The new article went live 3 days later. Title, "When Silence Isn't Consent. One Woman's Quiet Fight for Her Father's Legacy." Subhead, behind the headlines. A deeper truth about erasure, inheritance, and memory. It didn't trend. It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. The original article was quietly removed. The reporter who broke it posted a retraction in lowercase letters. My phone stopped buzzing. Savannah texted me, "They're quiet." Then, after a pause, "You ready?" I stared out at the horizon. This time, I didn't feel like a footnote. This time, the story had my name in the byline, and they couldn't crop it out. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. The beach house was quiet, the kind of silence that magnifies thoughts. I sat at the kitchen table where we used to play cards, folders spread around me like a paper battlefield. Every page was familiar by now legal summaries, notarized affidavits, grainy printouts of insurance lapses, timestamps, metadata. But I reread them anyway, as if certainty could be printed on paper. My hand hovered over the voice recording of Dad. I'd listened to it dozens of times, but that night I let it play one more time. His voice, thin but steady, wrapped around me like a memory blanket. I want Eleanor to have the house. Caroline makes things loud. Eleanor makes them last. It steadied me, but it didn't take the fear away. So I stepped outside. The moon was high silver against the black. I walked the length of the porch, hand grazing the rail Dad used to lean against when giving advice that sounded cryptic until it came true. You don't win by shouting Ellie, he once told me. You win by staying, by being the one left when the storm passes. That night, I didn't practice a speech. I didn't prepare for their glares. I just stood in the quiet, holding the past in one hand and the truth in the other. The court could try to weigh them tomorrow, but I already knew which one would last. The courthouse smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. I arrived early. No entourage, no lawyer in a designer suit. Just me. A navy dress my grandmother once called steel-wheeled blue and a folder held tight under my arm. Inside that folder were facts, not accusations, not outrage, just proof. Mum and Caroline sat across the aisle. Caroline in ivory, Mum in pearl grey. Their attorney was young, too tan and far too confident. He shuffled his papers like a magician about to perform. The clerk called the case. Whitmore vs. Whitmore. Petition for injunction. Disputed property. Claim of undue influence. The attorney stood first. He said words like vulnerable, coerced, estranged. He paused for emphasis on that last one. Let it linger like a bruise. I didn't flinch. When it was my turn, I stood with no dramatics. Just quiet resolve. Your Honour, I would like to submit video and audio recordings from the Trust's originator, my father. They speak to his state of mind and his explicit wishes. The judge, an older man with glasses slipping down his nose, nodded once. The lights dimmed. On the screen, the video began. Dad. Fragile but clear-eyed, wrapped in the old quilt from the porch, a chipped mug in hand. His voice was soft but deliberate. I want Eleanor to have this house. Caroline makes things loud. Eleanor makes them last. He looked at the camera, then beyond it. She's the only one who came after I fell, the only one who didn't ask for anything. This house isn't about fairness. It's about memory. No one in the courtroom moved. The audio followed, Caroline's voice unmistakable. She was never part of this family. She should have been easier to control. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was confirmation. The judge leaned back, tapped his pen twice. This court finds no evidence of undue influence. The recordings show clarity, not confusion. The language used by the plaintiffs suggests exclusion, not concern. He removed his glasses. His tone shifted. This court does not resolve family resentments. It enforces law, and in this matter, the law is clear. Petition denied. The gavel fell. I didn't celebrate. Caroline's fist curled in her lap, white-knuckled. Mum didn't speak. Her pearls trembled, but she didn't reach for me. I gathered my folder, walked out without looking back. Outside, a reporter stepped forward. Microphone lifted. Do you have anything you'd like to say to your family? I paused. Just long enough? No, I said. I already said it. I just used quieter words. Then I walked away. Toward the sunlit street. Toward the house that waited not as a prize, but as a memory I had fought to protect. And this time no one could rewrite the ending. The house was quiet when I returned. No laughter echoed off the walls. No perfume trailing behind Mom. No Caroline telling someone where to put the lemonade. Just the hum of the ocean and the creak of floorboards settling into silence. I unlocked the door, not with a key slipped under a mat, but with one engraved with my name. It clicked open, like it had been waiting. Inside, the room still held the same light, same driftwood shadows on the walls, but something felt lighter, as if the walls had exhaled. I moved slowly, not because I was scared, but because the house deserved intention. In the office, the one that was once Dad's, then Grandma's, I opened the bottom drawer of the old desk. It was still there, the wind chime, seashells on fishing line, knots tied with clumsy 9-year-old fingers. One shell still bore the faint, uneven scrawl, LEW. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, like a child again, and I began to untangle, not to make it perfect, not to restore it to showroom shine, but to honour it, because not everything broken needs to be discarded. Some things, like memory, are meant to carry the scars. When Savannah arrived, she didn't knock, just stepped through the door like she'd always belonged. She brought paper towels, a bucket, and a bottle of white wine. "You didn't think I'd let you clean windows alone, did you?" she said. We scrubbed in silence, dust and years falling away. We cleaned more than glass that day. Later, I stood at the kitchen window, the newly fixed wind chime in my hand. I hung it on the old hook. The breeze caught it. The shells danced. It didn't ring clearly. Not every note sang. But it moved like it remembered how. As the sun dipped into the sea, Savannah asked, "What now?" I looked out at the porch. The swing was still tilted. The steps still creaked. The paint still chipped. But it was mine. "It's funny," I said. "They told everyone I left." She looked at me. "I didn't," I said. "I never did." I touched the edge of the chime. I was always here. They just chose not to see me. We didn't toast. We didn't celebrate. We just stood there. 2 women, 1 house, and a breeze that finally felt like home. Room by room, I turned off the lights from the inside. Not because I was leaving, but because I could. The next afternoon, I was sweeping the porch when I saw someone walking up the path. It was Lily Caroline's daughter. 16 now, though. I still remembered her as the little girl who once whispered at a reunion, "Who's that lady?" She held a photo in her hand. A printed snapshot from years ago, Dad and me blurry and laughing, caught mid-motion on that very porch. She offered it to me. "I found this. I wanted you to have it." I looked at her unsure. "I'm sorry, no one told me," she added. "About everything." The breeze stirred between us. It always felt like this place belonged to everyone. But now I get it. It only stayed alive because someone kept it alive. I took the photo gently. "You're welcome here," I said. She smiled, soft, uncertain, but real. "Thanks for keeping it." And then she turned and walked back toward the road, her footsteps light as the wind. For a long moment, I stood there with the photo in hand, letting the past and future exhale together. If you're reading this, if you've ever felt like a ghost at your own table, this is for you. If you were left off the guest list, if you saw yourself cropped from the photo, if you waited for a call that never came, if your gifts went unwrapped, your name unspoken, your presence treated like an afterthought, you are not alone. I know how it feels to stand outside a door you once called home and hear laughter meant for someone else. I know the ache of pretending it doesn't matter, even when it matters so deeply it echoes. I know what it's like to walk through life quiet and competent, only to be told your silence made you invisible. But here's the truth they never tell you. You can leave and still belong. You can be forgotten and still be real. You can be edited out and still hold the story. You don't have to shout to matter. You don't need applause to exist. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is quietly stay standing. Not for revenge, not for show, but for truth, for yourself. if you've ever been told you're too sensitive, too distant, too much or not enough. Let this be your reminder. You are not too late. You are not too quiet. You are not erased. You are still here, and you are not the only one. Outside my window, the wind chime sways. Shells clink softly like laughter, wrapped in memory. It plays the same tune I once made with my father. The day he bent down and handed me a piece of the ocean and said, "You think in tides, not waves." It sways now, not because anyone watches, but because the wind is enough. So if you're listening from the edge, if you're sitting on the floor of your own story, wondering if anyone still sees you, let the sound remind you, you never left. They just stopped looking. And now you can come home. The chime moves again, steady. And somewhere the little girl I was once is smiling.